Okay, so let's go through our 5 case studies. The first one. My voice is so soft. It's cracking today. That's soft cracking. Okay. John is diagnosed as having cancer of the pancreas. He has only 6 months to live. He would like to use the time he has remaining to fly back to Italy to prepare his family for his death. Decides not to consent to treatment that he finds psychologically repugnant, a treatment that really will not cure his condition. He dies 6 months later. So the first part of your answer should be to identify whether or not this is active euthanasia or passive euthanasia. In this case, he's not consenting to treatment, so it is passive euthanasia because he does not want the treatment. Next thing you have to answer is this ordinary treatment or extraordinary treatment? And so in this case, um, it's going to be extraordinary treatment because it's a treatment that has a serious burden on him. He only has 6 months to live. He may not be able to enjoy those 6 months because of whatever treatment, especially, for example, chemotherapy or morphine or any other medication. So it's going to diminish the amount of time he has to take care of his personal affairs and to be with his family and prepare them for his own death. So this is a medical treatment that's going to have a serious burden on himself, and it says he finds it psychologically repugnant, and also that it's going to not prolong his life much. In fact, it might take away what precious time he has. So under Catholic, we call this bioethics, ethics dealing with biology and medicine, patients, etc. He has a right to not go through extraordinary treatment, and because it's passive and extraordinary, he's justified in not having this treatment. Okay, and he does in fact die 6 months later. So the medical prognosis was correct, and he used those 6 months to prepare himself and his family to his death, and also to take care of his affairs so that his family will be taken care of, and especially going back home to another country. This would not have been possible if there were side effects or the treatments left him uh, less than mobile, less than conscious. Okay, are there any questions for the first one? Okay, no? Okay, now Patrick asked me, do you want to send you capacity relief for suffering? No, it's just for homework. I told you that today's journal will be your last one. So case number 1 is justified. Say that's absolutely correct. Okay, he is justified. Again, because it's passive euthanasia, withholding, withdrawing from treatment, and it's extraordinary treatment. It's not going to be too successful. It's not going to prolong his life significantly. In fact, he probably is going to diminish the life he does have because of the treatment limiting his mobility, his consciousness. After every operation, you go through a period of recovery, and if you have to spend a week or so in a special unit or chemotherapy and you're throwing up and struggling, you are in fact being weakened, and there's no prognosis for any type of success, and the extension of time is very minimal. So whatever time he has is 6 months, he wants to be with his family. There's a real good case of a father who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he sold everything and took his wife and his 2 kids, and he went on a round the world trip. He wanted to be with his family together and explore different parts of the world. And all throughout their journey, they were videotaping. And in videotaping, it was his last messages to his children that they could have something of him. Um, to remember him, and the experience of traveling the world with the family. For him, it was most enjoyable, and for the kids, it was most enjoyable because they got to spend time together. Okay, any questions? So the first one is justified because it's passive and extraordinary treatment. Okay, case number two. A woman arrives at the hospital and sees her husband after an accident. The doctor says to her, if we operate now, there's a good chance he will live, but he will be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life and have no use of his arms. The woman says to herself, I know he would not want to live in that condition. That would be too much of a serious burden on him. She refuses to consent to surgery. Now, in this case, it's going to be passive euthanasia. The one term we haven't discussed and we'll pick up tomorrow, it's going to be non-voluntary because the husband is not making the decision, the wife is. So she's making the decision on his behalf. And she's also assuming that he would not want to live in that condition. She says, I know he would not. And therefore, um, the intention is not to have him live in that condition, but also for the wife, the intention is for her not to deal with him. And so she refuses to consent to surgery, and therefore this is unjustified euthanasia because it's passive, but it's ordinary treatment. Ordinary treatment means that it's not going to be a serious burden on the patient, either financially, physically, emotionally, or psychologically. So the operation will give him hope to live. His living will be different because he will be in a wheelchair and he will have no use of his arms or perhaps little use for his arms. And therefore, the burden that she's really talking about is not on her husband, but on her. And um, again, this is ordinary treatment. It's not anything out of the ordinary. There are lots of people who are wheelchairs, quadriplegic, paraplegics, lots of people who may lose a leg, especially veterans from conflict zones who may come back with no legs or one leg or part of a leg. Um, those are all treatable with orthotics. The wheelchair, there's all kinds of wonderful wheelchairs, including sports wheelchairs, including electric wheelchairs. Um, you can join Invictus Games from, I think it's Prince Harry, where you have special games for veterans who have been injured, and you have paraplegic games, including the Olympic Games, where you can compete. You can lead a normal life even if you're in a wheelchair. It'll be a different kind of life, but still would be a normal life. You have mobility challenges, but those are all fixable. But the wife doesn't want anything to do with it. Now she says, or seems to be saying, that she's doing it out of love for her husband. And in this case, no, she's doing it out of love for herself. She's not looking after the best interest of her husband. And no one asked him to, whether he wants the operation or not. So she made the decision for him, and this is a grave violation of what we call patient rights. The patient, the individual patient, has a right to make his or her own decisions about treatment. If my family doctor phones and wants to talk to my wife and she's not there, and if I say to her, well, I can take the message, what's this all about? And the doctor will say, no, I can't talk to you, even though you're the husband. I have to talk to the patient, which is your wife. And so I can't relay information to you because that's a violation of privacy and confidentiality. And the same thing extends to making decisions, especially life altering or life changing or life eliminating decisions. Um, the husband should have been asked. Husband should have been told what can happen, what will happen, what kind of life you will live, and then he will have to make a decision. But even if he were informed, it's still ordinary treatment, and therefore passive and ordinary makes it unjustified. Okay, any questions about number two? Okay, and I'll remind you the story I told you yesterday about the young girl, a 19-year-old who was in a serious car accident, and she was happy because she was alive. And I still remember today, as it was like 40 years ago, that she wheeled herself with her family out of the hospital after a 6-month stay, never able to walk again, but always able to contribute to society. Okay, any questions? Okay, number three. Let me take a break here because I've had some more people join us. 1 second. Hold on to that, Kevin. Hold on to that. So, hey, thank you guys. We're all here now. Let me just quickly change the attendance. Okay, Kevin asked if you got some of the answers wrong but justified them, will you take marks off? What I'm going to ask you to do, if you want to resubmit it to me, correct it. Even after we take it up, I'll be happy to accept your second um, assignment, not the first, if you've corrected it. Does that help, Kevin? Okay. And last question. Again, you weren't here at the beginning. I haven't been on the computer other than marking 3 journals. So I'll have to, when I have time, go to the computer and check it out. Okay. Okay, go to number. So first one is justified. Second one is unjustified. The third one is a man has already entered into the dying process. It's only a matter of time before he dies. The doctor says that the respirator is just prolonging his death, but someone else says that turning off the respirator will be murder, even though the doctor's diagnosis is correct. They turn off the respirator, and the man dies in 28 hours. Okay, so this is a very, very sensitive issue here. The first line is important. He's entered into the dying process. Now, some may argue that the minute you're born is the beginning of the end of your life, even though it might be 60, 70, 80, 90 years, or my father-in-law's situation, almost 99. Um, in this case, death is imminent. Whatever illness he has is slowly going to take away his life. That his heart will fail, perhaps, or organs will fail, or He might have some his liver failing, and it's going to affect other organs. So in this case, it's entering into the dying process. So it's the end of life situation, and it's very very sensitive for a lot of people. Um, my mother-in-law was supposed to succumb to her illness uh, 2 years ago, in March 2 years ago, and they started feeding her in her through her stomach through a tube, and they prolonged her life for another 6 months. Sorry, and of the 6 months, 5 of them were very productive and really good quality, but the last month she started entering into the we call the dying process. And as I told you yesterday, we visited her in the last month, and sometimes she just awakened when we arrived, and then would give us a hug and a kiss, and then was so tired or experiencing the medication, the painkillers, that she simply would close her eyes and fall back to sleep. And it was very difficult. And then when she had her two strokes, then whatever brain activity was present before was very, very diminished. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. Um, Second line says it's only a matter of time before he dies. Again, death is imminent. And just like in the first case, this is a time where a person should prepare for death. Um, and I reminded you of a story of my old French teacher. She made French so interesting because she had all these travel posters from all over the world that she's been traveling all over the world. And so we learned French by pretending we were going from one place to another. So we'd be flying to Egypt, or we go to Africa, or we go to Cambodia, or we go to the Philippines, or we go to Russia, or we go to Italy, or we go to France. And so by making us jet setters, we call ourselves in those days, traveling, we learned to speak the language. And I found out that she was in St. Mike's Hospital palliative care, and I went to visit her. And this would have been about almost 25 years after being in a class. And to my surprise, she remembered me. And so we sat down, we talked, and she told me things about myself that I either did not remember or I wanted to forget, because I was very, very shy, skinny little thing in grade 9 in her class. But she was terrific, and we spent time talking. And what amazed me the most is that she, as I told you yesterday, she told me that she had only about 5 days to live. That she had entered into the dying process. She was preparing. She had taken care of all of her affairs, and then she um, was so happy because she said that God gave her an opportunity to travel and meet lots of people, make lots of friends, and teach at my old school, which is Jarvis Collegiate. And she had no regrets. And she thanks God for all the opportunities that God has given, and is now prepared to meet God face to face. And in fact, she died about 4.5 days after I visited her. And I went to the funeral, and all my old teachers were there from my old school. And she had prepared her own funeral. And she had a slideshow presentation of all the places she had been to. Pictures of her at the in Egypt, seeing the pyramids, in China, in Africa, in Europe. And, everything we saw in her classroom was, in fact, the life she lived. And she prepared everything down to the last minute detail. And the way her funeral started, and it was in the chapel of a funeral home, was the phone rang and her voicemail came on. So she had recorded a voicemail message saying something like, "Hello, I'm not here right now, and you can leave a message, but I'm not going to return your phone call because I won't be here anymore." And so that's how she started her funeral. She arranged every single last detail, and she was able to do so because she had accepted death and accepted the dying process, and um, was able to have some time to prepare her funeral. And then the last thing she said just before she hung up on that cell phone or that landline message was, "Please don't cry for me. I've had a great life, and I'm very, very happy where I'm going." She's going to be with God. Okay. So the doctor says the respirator is just prolonging his death. So the respirator is not going to do anything. He's getting worse and worse and worse. And they decide to remove the respirator, and he dies within 28 hours. Okay, and this is justified because the keeping on the respirator is not going to improve his life, is deteriorating, and therefore it's considered to be extraordinary treatment. So the withdrawal from the respirator is a passive euthanasia, and it's extraordinary treatment, and it's very burdensome and offers no hope for the patient. And death would be imminent whether he's on the respirator or not. So this is number 3 is justified. Any questions for number 3? Okay, someone has left us, so I have to change the attendance to absence. As the student comes back, then I'll change it again. So number 3 is justified. Actually, he does make the decision. Oh, no, but someone else says, so the doctor says their spirit is just prolonging, but somebody else complains. But I mean, the way I understood it is he made the decision to turn the respirator, or somebody else made the decision to turn the respirator off because there is no hope, and had already entered into the dying process. Okay. So the way I understood it was he made the decision, but perhaps you're right, James, that perhaps a family member made the decision. Um, Either way, it would be just a justified decision because it's the respirator is simply prolonging something that would not last too long. I sort of have lots of stories, but a few years ago, my father-in-law is almost 99 years old now, and when he was 92, he was changing some curtains in the bathroom, and he fell down and he broke his hip in 3 places. Now, for old people, that's the worst thing that can happen to them is a broken hip, because it takes forever to heal if they in fact heal. And so I arrived at his house and found him lying down next to his bed. He couldn't get into his bed. He slept on the floor all night. I got really upset because he didn't phone me to come pick him up. And so when I saw him, we called the ambulance. We took him to the hospital, and we called other members of the family. Now, my brother-in-law is a doctor. I'll say, hold on a second. I'll come back to you. Okay? So my brother-in-law is a doctor. He's a radiologist. So I was in the hospital room when the doctor came and reviewed um, his X-rays and said to him, "You're going to have an operation right away. We schedule it within the next 6 hours because this is a surgery that couldn't wait. It was broken in 3 places, and being so old, it'd be very difficult for him." And they turned to me, asked me who I was. I told them I was the son-in-law. And then they asked me a question. He has to consent to surgery. And then as a family member, he wants to know whether or not, if anything happens during the operation, uh, who do not resuscitate. In other words, if he has a heart attack and he has that they will not try to revive him or resuscitate him. And even though I teach bioethics in the morality course, when confronted with a personal situation like that, I panicked. And that's why I keep saying that these situations are very, very sensitive. And so I looked at my father-in-law, and basically what he was saying is that if something happened in operation, don't try to revive and resuscitate him, let him die. And so I looked at him, and then I looked at the doctor. I said, "I'm sorry, I can't make a decision, but his son, his oldest son, is coming, be here very soon, and he should be making a decision for him." I felt very uncomfortable for making that decision, and thank God my brother-in-law came, and the doctor asked him same question, and my brother-in-law's response was nothing heroic, which means nothing extraordinary. If something happens, then it'll be extraordinary or heroic, as he describes it, and therefore don't resuscitate and let him die. Fortunately for my father-in-law, he came through the operation and he's well. Like I say, he's almost 99 now. Okay, so case number 3 is justified. Doctor confirmed that treatment was prolonging death, extraordinary treatment, and wouldn't cure his condition. Absolutely right, say. It's not going to cure it. It's not going to give him much hope for the future, and he's already deteriorating. So, in going into the dying process, you're slowly getting weaker, perhaps losing consciousness, and it's just a struggle that you're not going to be successful with. Okay, no other questions? So let's look at number 4. And Michelle had some questions about this yesterday, and thank you for the questions. And I had actually a good answer I found for you that I'll include in a PowerPoint presentation tomorrow. Okay, and I'll bring that question up again. A Missouri family decides that they cannot afford the treatments for their handicapped child. I should change that to disabled child. The financial burden is heavy. They can no longer afford community sports for their other children. They can no longer eat the best quality foods. They would like to be able to vacation. Now all they do is eat, work, and exist. They discontinue treatments and the child dies in 2 weeks. Okay, this action is unjustified because it's passive euthanasia, but ordinary treatment. The only burden they're experiencing is a financial burden that's diminishing their lifestyles. So they're sacrificing the one child who's disabled for their own quality of life, quantity of life, pleasures in life, sports competitions, rep teams, restaurants, dining out, vacations. Interesting that none of that they can do now in most places in the world because a lot of restaurants are closed, travel restrictions, you can't get in and out of countries, even provinces in some cases. There are no rep teams, no sports teams, no group teams like that happening right now. So this is going to be just unjustified because it's ordinary treatment and passive euthanasia. And you can never refuse ordinary treatment in the withdrawal of some kind of treatment. Any questions about number 4? Okay. We go to question number 5. An 87-year-old grandmother who has had 2 heart attacks before signs a do not revive, or we also call that a do not resuscitate form or order in the palliative care unit of St. Mike's Hospital. She visits with her family and grandchildren daily, but one night she has a heart attack. She isn't revived, she dies. Some believe she committed suicide, others not. Okay, in this case, it's passive euthanasia, and then the resuscitation or revival, uh, electric shocks, perhaps medication, chemicals, etc., is considered extraordinary treatment. Having suffered 2 heart attacks, she is already in a very seriously weakened condition because every heart attack damages the muscle, so it doesn't function as well as it did before. Therefore, it's not producing the amount of blood flow and sending the blood to be oxygenated into the lungs and retrieving the blood to be again oxygenated in the lungs. So a third heart attack is going to leave her even more and more weakened. Same thing happens if someone gets a stroke, which is a lack of oxygen or blood to the brain. And every time you have a subsequent stroke, it leaves the damage even greater. And the same thing happens with heart attacks. The first heart attack, your heart is damaged, and then you're damaging a damaged heart. In this case, third time, you damage a damaged heart, and that's going to weaken her even further. And this is why it's extraordinary treatment and passive euthanasia. You don't resuscitate. Okay, are there any questions for number 5? Okay, so we're okay then. So if you haven't already done so, please make sure that you do send me your chart. Your chart is your second last assignment. Let's take a break for 2 minutes while I get our Denzel Washington. Okay, one student has left us, so I have marked that student absent. If they choose to come, I will mark them late. If they choose not to come, then they're going to be assessed to skip. Zilan, the number 5 is justified. Correct. So to review, number 1 is justified. Number 2 is unjustified. Number 3 is justified. Number 4 is unjustified. And number 5 is justified. There will be no assessment or
Sorry.
Yes?
So for number 4, did you say number 4 is justified yesterday?
No, number 4 is unjustified.
Um,
Now, Michelle raised a point that it could be pushed to the idea of relativism, but every case you have to look at it subjectively, either through the eyes and the experience of the individual or through your own eyes and experience. But you always must keep an eye on the person that is being affected. And therefore, this family, number 4, is only concerned about their life or their quality of life, their enjoyment of life. And a disabled child wrecks their fun. This is why a lot of people, for example, will have an abortion if they find out that their child is not going to be that perfect baby, that they may have a heart condition, or they might have cystic fibrosis, or they might have Down syndrome, and they're not going to be that perfect little creature that they want to have. And therefore, it becomes a burden having a child with any type of physical or mental condition. So the family is only out for their interests, not for the other. And this is where it can be dangerous because it could be relativistic. that anybody can do what they want, and because they have authority or power over the child, they make the decision what they think is in the best interest of the child. But in fact, their intention is not the best interest of the child, but their own interests and their own way of living. They would rather lose a child and be able to go to a restaurant or play rep sports or go on vacation. So those are what they value more than the presence of a child. It's interesting that in the United States, the new Supreme Court Justice Comey has 7 children. And of the 7 children she has, 2 children were adopted from Haiti, especially when Haiti went through the hurricanes and the earthquakes and combination of the two. So her and her husband went to Haiti and adopted 2 children. And their own 5th child has Down syndrome. And she described him as the most popular of all the children because everybody wants to be with him and help him and learn from him. As I said yesterday, in a lot of cultures, having a child with a mental or physical disability is something to be shamed, um, to be hidden. Um, they're embarrassed. In a lot of other cultures, a disabled child, physically or mentally disabled, is God's gift. It's a grace because that child brings out all the love and goodness within you. Think of what we talked about earlier, Emmanuel Levinus. The child asks for hospitality, and you have to be hospitable to the child. And in encountering the disabled child, you discover the goodness you have within you. Okay, so this is a way of putting Emmanuel Levinus's ideas in action.
Sir, so
Yes.
will we still be able to make some changes to the
Oh,
document?
absolutely, absolutely. I think Kevin asked that question. So if you've already sent me it, resend it to me.
Okay,
And,
okay,
and in your email, say, this is the updated version, or this is the one I want you to assess. Okay. I've given you all the answers. And if you somehow messed up on it, you have a chance to improve it. It's out of 5. So send me a second copy. You can fix it. You can send it to me anytime later on today. You have time to work on in class today. I promised you no more homework. You might have a little bit of reading tonight, but I don't want you to do anything strenuously. And I'm not going to evaluate or assess anything more other than our last journal. So this is your second last assignment. That's out of 5. And then your last journal on Denzel Washington, Put God First. Okay, thank you for
okay. Thank
asking.
you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions? And if you look at on the chat, Michelle uh, has summarized everything for me. Thank you, Michelle. You guys are great, you know, this class, you guys help each other out. So I'm really happy that you do that. You really care and to help each other. It shows your amazing benevolence. And you guys are also, like I say, very appreciative. It's not the first time I've seen the word thanks amongst yourselves. Excellent. Okay, any questions? So, Michelle, I'm going to bring that idea up that it's not a relativist position. It's what we call a subjectivist position. Treat the person as a subject, not as an object. Put yourself in that person's shoes. See the situation from their perspective, and understand the decision from their perspective. But most important of all, always value them and value their dignity as human beings, created in the image and likeness of God. So that's the most fundamental criteria in all the situation. Is every situation is different. Every situation involves an individual, a subject, a person with feelings and emotions and a life history, and everyone is special. And therefore, every situation has to be treated differently. Okay, questions? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give you about 5 minutes to make corrections. And at 1:25, I'll come back, take a little break here. And for homework tomorrow, I want you to do compassionate suffering. It's 1 to 4. It's in your handout. And I believe the questions are on the second page. Then I want you to read the package document on euthanasia that's put up by Life. And for the class, after we watch the video, I want you to do your last video. No, we want to watch our last video, and this is going to be your last journal of the quadmester. This is number 25, and I usually reserve this for grade 12 for graduation, but I thought I'd get it done now so we can relax the rest of the week. We're going to do small little assignments in class this for the rest of the week and for next week. Perhaps watch another movie that I thought might be something important. It's very light. I have all the marks I need now. I'd like to get you your progress report and therefore your final marks by Friday, so you can enjoy your mark, but more importantly, you can correct any mistakes that I've made. Okay, so that's what I'm aiming for. The marks have to be in next Wednesday or Thursday. So it gives me a couple of days to verify everything. No, Louisa, the only thing you'll send to me is the journal, Put God First. The compassionate relief of suffering is just for homework, and we'll take it up tomorrow. So let me type that up. Asking. Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble today. Lots of spelling errors. I'm embarrassed. Okay, so for Louisa, anyone else, please send only your, sorry, should be last journal, number 25, put God First. And compassion relief for suffering is only for homework or classwork, because I'll give you time in class to work on it, not to be handed in. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break now. Sorry, and we'll come back at 1:30. At 1:30, and hopefully that student will return to class. So Mr. Savito's asked me and all the teachers to be a little bit more vigilant with people coming in and out. So one student left about 40 minutes ago and has not come back. So they'll be getting a phone call that they were absent from class. Okay. Okay, so let's present. This is your last video, your last journal. I would like the journal to be handed in by 3 o'clock, so that'll give you an hour and a half to work on it. Okay. So let's share.
Number one.
Sorry.
Number one. Put God first. Put God first in everything you do. Everything that you think you see in me, everything that I've accomplished, everything that you think I have, and I have a few things, everything that I have is by the grace of God. Understand that. It's a gift. 40 years ago, March 27th, 1975, it was 40 years ago, just this past March, I was flunking out of college. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I hope none of you can relate. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I was sitting in my mother's beauty shop. They still call it beauty shop now? What do they call it? Yeah, I was sitting in a beauty parlor. I was sitting in my mother's beauty parlor, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I see behind me this woman under the dryer. And every time she looked up, every time I looked up, she was looking at me, looking me in the eyes. I didn't know who she was, and I said,
Sure, I'm going to start over again. Okay?
Number one, put God first. Put God first in everything you do. Everything that you think you see in me, everything that I've accomplished, everything that you think I have, and I have a few things, everything that I have is by the grace of God. Understand that. It's a gift. 40 years ago, March 27th, 1975, it was 40 years ago, just this past March, I was flunking out of college. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I hope none of you can relate. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I was sitting in my mother's beauty shop. They still call it beauty shop now? What do they call it? Yeah, I was sitting in a beauty parlor. I was sitting in my mother's beauty parlor, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I see behind me this woman under the dryer. And every time she looked up, every time I looked up, she was looking at me, looking me in the eye. I didn't know who she was, and I said, she said, somebody give me a pen. Give me a pencil. I have a prophecy. March 27, 1975. She said, boy, you were going to travel the world and speak to millions of people. Now, mind you, I was flunked out of college. I'm thinking about joining the army. I didn't know what I was going to do, but she's telling me I'm going to travel the world and speak to millions of people. Well, I have traveled the world. And I have spoke to millions of people. But that's not the most important thing, success that I had. The most important thing is that what she taught me and what she told me that day has stayed with me since. I've been protected. I've been directed. I've been corrected. I've kept God in my life, and it's kept me humble. I didn't always stick with him, but he always stuck with me. So stick with him in everything you do. If you think you want to do what you think I've done, then do what I've done and stick with God. Number two, fail big. That's right. Fail big. Today's the beginning of the rest of your life, and it can be very frightening. It's a new world out there. It's a mean world out there. You only live once. So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances professionally. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test was 9 dots, and you had to.
Okay, stop right there. Okay, I want to 4 is the answer.
And you had
You draw 9 dots. Sorry. Draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots.
professionally. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test was 9 dots.
Okay.
And you had to draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots without lifting the pencil. The only way to do it was to go outside the box. So don't be afraid to go outside the box.
Hello everyone.
Sorry,
Thank
commercial.
you for joining me. 2 years ago, I made a decision that I was going to make a change for myself and my
Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to fail big, to dream big. But remember, dreams without goals are just dreams. And they ultimately fuel disappointment. So have dreams, but have goals. Life goals, yearly goals, monthly goals, daily goals. I try to give myself goals every day. Sometimes it's just to not hurt somebody out. Simple goals, but have goals. And understand that to achieve these goals, you must apply discipline and consistency. In order to achieve your goals, you must apply discipline, which you've already done, and consistency every day, not just one Tuesday and just a few days. You have to work at it every day. You have to plan every day. You've heard the saying, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. Hard work works. Working really hard is what successful people do. And in this text, tweet, twerk world that you've grown up in, remember, just because you're doing a lot more doesn't mean you're getting a lot more done. Remember that. Just because you're doing a lot more doesn't mean you're getting a lot more done. Don't confuse movement with progress. My mother told me, yeah, because you can run in place all the time and never get anywhere. So continue to strive, continue to have goals, continue to progress.
Get close to the words of the prophets. God is in there.
Number 3, you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. I'll say it again. You'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. I don't care how much money you make, you can't take it with you. And it's not how much you have, it's what you do with what you have. We all have different talents. Some of you will be doctors, some lawyers, some scientists, some educators, some nurses, some teachers. Yeah, okay. Some preachers. The most selfish thing you can do in this world is help someone else. Why is it selfish? Because the gratification, the goodness that comes to you, the good feeling that I get from helping others, nothing's better than that. Not jewelry, not the big house I have, not the cars, but it's the joy. That's where the joy is, in helping others. That's where the success is. Finally, I pray that you put your slippers way under the bed tonight, so that when you wake up in the morning, you have to get on your knees to reach them. And while you're down there, say thank you for grace. Thank you for mercy. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for wisdom. Thank you for parents. Thank you for love. Thank you for kindness. Thank you for humility. Thank you for peace. Thank you for prosperity. Say thank you in advance for what's already yours. That's how I live my life. That's why I am. One of the reasons why I am today. Say thank you in advance for what is already yours. True desire in the heart for anything good is God's proof to you sent beforehand to indicate that it's yours already. I'll say it again. True desire in the heart, that itch that you have, whatever it is you want to do, that thing that you want to do to help others and to grow and to make money, that desire, that itch, that's God's proof to you, sent beforehand already to indicate that it's yours. And anything you want good, you can have. So claim it. Work hard to get it. When you get it, reach back. Pull someone else up. Each one, teach one. Don't just aspire to make a living. Aspire to make a difference.
Okay, so that's your last journal. Let me just point out some things. Just go over a few things to point them out to you. So first one, he says, put God first. And he talks about love is a gift from God. We call this grace. Everything that Denzel Washington has, he attributes to God. So therefore, he says, keep God in your life and stick with him. He won't abandon you. Number two, he says, don't be afraid to fail big. This is the beginning of the rest of your life. Therefore, do not be afraid to think outside the box. So he had 9 dots, and the only way you could solve it, like solving a Rubik's Cube, is getting outside of the box. And so he drew it for you. Dreams without goals leads to disappointment. So he says, dream, but have a goal with your dream, and then work towards it. And the way you achieve success is through discipline and consistency. We call this diligence. So get to work and be consistent, work hard. He says work at it, and he says hard work works. Number 3, he says you've never seen a U-Haul. It's one of those trucks or those little things that you attach to your a truck or to your car where you can load things on. Load things in. So he says you cannot bring it with you. So you never see that in the procession at a funeral. Interesting thing that he says then is the most selfish thing you can do is helping others. In this sense, contrary to everything that I've talked about during the course, he comes at it from a different angle, that to love others is selfish, meaning you're doing it for you as well. So by that, it means that the intransitive effect should be on you. So by helping others, you discover that you are good, and therefore you are free. And then next idea he says is put the slippers under your bed when you go at night, so that when you wake up in the morning, you have to kneel down to reach under your bed to pick up the slippers. And while you're kneeling, he says, say thank you for everything you have. A new day. And the last point he says is don't aspire to make a living. So as you're graduating, you want to pursue a career. It's not just about making money and a career and having wealth. He says aspire to make a difference. So be a difference in other people's lives wherever you meet. But that's the essence of how and why we were created, out of love, to be able to love God and to love others, and then ultimately love ourselves as living people. Okay, so those are just some ideas. I thought it was great. What I'll do is after this, I'll replay it again as you start writing your journal. So let's see if there's any questions first. Yep, Azine, should we write our idea, take any of those points or several of those points, put God first, fail big, can't take it with you, pray, thank God, and aspire to make a difference. You can pick any or several of these ideas or whatever interests you. Denzel Washington is one of my favorite actors. My wife and I went to watch one of his first movies when we were dating. It was at the Toronto Film Festival, and it was called Mississippi Masala, about a Ugandan family. It's like my wife became refugees, but they ended up in New Orleans and Mississippi River area. And then Denzel Washington falls in love with the daughter. So that was one of his first movies, and we became fans ever since. So for today, you can work on it now. You have lots of times. So the rest of the period, we're going to be working on two things. One is, well, three things actually. One is correct your euthanasia cases in case you made any mistakes, and please send it to me. Number two, your last journal, and I'll have it in by 3 o'clock so that I can mark them and then include them in your progress report and your final report. So it's called, the person speaking is Denzel Washington, a famous American actor, and he's giving a speech to a graduating class at university. It's called Put God First. So you can write down either Put God First or Denzel Washington Put God First. And then write whatever journal you want about it. And then for homework, or as I classified it, classwork, include, please do the assignment. Don't hand it in to me. I'll take it up tomorrow. Nathan, thank you. In your email, I did give you the YouTube site. So I dragged it into your emails at the bottom of your email. Thank you, Nathan, for sharing it. And this is your last journal. Okay, any questions? So before 3 o'clock, I want your last journal. That will give us 25. So it's the last 5 journals gives you a mark of a 10. And then your euthanasia chart, and then do your assignment on suffering, passionate suffering. And then please read the package on euthanasia for tomorrow's class. Okay, so I'm going to replay the video.